Hi, it's 1010 the Navigator, and I forgot to do the official showing of the book that I'm reading, the Anunnaki Final Warning to Earth and Their Return in 2022, the 5th edition by Maximilien de Lafayette. Now, I know we read the other one, which is a 4th edition, and it was named differently. So, as you can see, I hope you can, I don't know, I don't want to lose my spot from the last video. It's different. It's not like questions or anything. It's just topics, table of contents and stuff in the beginning here, which are in question format, but it doesn't break down into chapters. It breaks down into parts. So, that being said, I'm on page 59. Is it true that their return will seal the fate of planet Earth and all humanity? Question: did the Anunnaki plan on returning to Earth to clean house? Is it true that their return will seal the fate of planet Earth and all humanity? The answer: absolutely. According to Sinhar Ambar Anati, an Anunnaki hybrid woman born on Earth of Anunnaki lineage, who married an Anunnaki Sinhar, traveled to Nibiru, Ashtari, lived there for several years and studied the true history of humanity here on Earth, as well as learning much more about life on Nibiru. Yes, they will be returning in 2022, and the decision they have made is now irrevocable and final. Before her final departure from Earth back to Nibiru in 2027, Sinhar Ambar Anati contacted Ulema de Lafayette with a desire for him to publish an account of her life and experiences both here on Earth and Nibiru with humans, Anunnaki, hybrids, and greys. The most fascinating parts of her account were her meetings with top echelon military brass and scientists from different countries and governments concerning their return, or the return of the Anunnaki to Earth, and the reason behind their return. Anbar Anati's story and revelations. Herewith is an excerpt from her story as told to Maximilien de Lafayette and Dr. Elil Arbel, who included in their book Anunnaki Ultimatum End of Time. Note: Maximilien de Lafayette and Dr. Elil Arbel wrote the story of Sinhar Ambar Anati in 2008. The following is an excerpt from the story, and it has been authorized by Ulema and author de Lafayette to reproduce it in this book and its entirety. Sinhar Ambar Anati, in her own words: I was taken to Earth and went to a hotel in New York. I had with me a special device, an ingenious thing that had on it the special telephone numbers of top members of the National Security Agency, or NSA, as everyone refers to them. Only 2 or 3 people in the world have these numbers. Not even the President of the United States has access to them. They are used only for matters related to extraterrestrial reverse engineering. The device makes sure the phones will promptly be answered, and when I called, I gave them data that recognized as their own extraterrestrial material. They were shocked, but nevertheless, they agreed to meet with me. I suppose they realized they had no choice. Rather politely, they offered to fly me to Washington, D.C., where they wanted to have the meeting, but I informed them that it was not necessary. It was easy for me to simply materialize in D.C., and I did not want them to know my current address, if this could be prevented. They directed me to come to the Four Seasons Hotel in Georgetown, where they were to meet me at the lobby. I was to know, if questioned at the hotel, that I was heading for the suite that was reserved under the name of a Middle Eastern gentleman who owned a limousine service in D.C. and had often used the hotel for similar purposes. 3 members of the NSA were waiting for me. I materialized a little distance away from the hotel and walked there on M Street. 3 members of the NSA were waiting for me, and they took me to the reserved suite where 15 more people were sitting around a huge table. They rose and greeted me politely, but I could clearly see the suspicion in their eyes and in their thoughts. I noticed that the shades of all the windows were closed, and I saw no telephone. However, they all had gadgets in their hands, which I have recognized immediately. They were navigation devices, which at the time were known only to extraterrestrials, not any humans. For a moment, I assumed that they got it from the Greys for communication purposes, and then noticed that quite a few of these people were really Greys who had shape-shifted to resemble humans. I can easily identify them because even while shape-shifting, the Greys cannot turn their heads independently of their body. They have to turn the entire body if they wish to look to the sides. As they turn, their eyes cannot follow their heads quickly like human eyes, but they have to refocus. The Greys attended the meeting. All that is done rather discreetly, but after living with the hybrids and the Greys, I could not miss that. In addition, humans usually fidget, move around. The Greys never do. When seated, they sit quietly, immobile. When standing, they are straight and immobile as well. In addition to that, I had more instructions from Nibiru as to how to recognize all shapeshifters, which I cannot explain because it involves using a conduit. One of the Greys at the end of the table was tapping nervously on the edge of the table with something that looked like a pen, and from time to time pointed it towards me. I recognized this gadget as a scanning device which we use on Nibiru. It was not held by any of the humans because the fiber scanning device was not known to the human scientific community until much later, 2006 or 2007. I suppose the Greys kept it to themselves for a while. I did my best to ignore the fact that half the people there were Greys and proceeded as if I had no idea and was talking only to humans. I had nothing to fear really, since I could annihilate the Greys with one thought, and I decided that discretion was the best approach. The Greys maintained their presence through it and said nothing at all. Come to think of it, I was a little used to the treachery of the Greys, but I have to admit that I was a little distressed by the humans' duplicity and stupidity. Do they really think I won't recognize the Greys? Holographic pictures that showed them the entire sequence of the Roswell crash. I have explained to them who I was, telling the absolute truth, and giving my name as Ambar Anati. Naturally, they did not believe me. To help persuade them, I first of all projected certain images on one of the walls. These were holographic pictures that showed them the entire sequence of the Roswell crash, and where the Greys was held the data pertaining to their crash and their research. They still were not persuaded that I was who I claimed to be, but the fact that the projections were done without any equipment made them uneasy and less sure of themselves. They were at least ready to listen. I told them quite a lot about the Greys and their agenda. By now, I said, you must be aware that they do not tell the truth, that they are not to be trusted. Business is business, said one of them. They have given us more than they promised to, so we have gained additional knowledge. It's not really a big deal if they abduct a few more people. First of all, it's not a few people, it's thousands that are tortured and killed. What can we say? Answered another. Sometimes harsh measures cannot be avoided. I did my best to hide my feelings about such a statement and went on. Are you aware of the fact that they are trying to take over Earth? No, we were not informed about such intent, said another. And are you aware of the invisible radioplasmic belt around the Earth? That they want to isolate Earth from the universe? The belt can expand up or down and can affect missiles, rockets, and airplanes and blow them up. It explains what has happened to various airplanes in Vietnam, and also to human spacecraft and space missions. We don't understand what you want us to do, said one of them. I want you to trust the Anunnaki. They intend to help you get rid of the Greys. This is really very simple. Either you go with the Anunnaki, in which case much can be done, or you stay with the Greys. If you choose to stay with the Greys, the Anunnaki will return and clean up the earth in a way that you will not like. They are perfectly capable of annihilating the entire population of the atrocities that do not stop. Are you threatening us? Asked one of them. The rest stared at me impassive. I would never call it a threat, I said. I would call it a fair warning. Remember, the Anunnaki are stronger than both human and Greys. They did not have to send me. They could do what they wanted with me without warning, but they prefer to save as many humans as possible. How do we know how strong the Anunnaki really are? Said one of them. After all, they have been away for so long, they don't seem to have much of an interest in us. Let me show you a small example of what the Anunnaki can do, I said. In a blink, I multiplied myself into 30 Victorias. We arranged ourselves around the table behind the sitting people. They jumped off their seats, shocked. It's a trick, cried one of them. Grab her. Please do grab, I said. Touch all 30 of me and see that this is not an idle trick. We can become billions if we wish. Hesitantly, they touched some of the multiples. A few multiples offered to shake hands, which the humans did, trembling. They could not deny the multiples' tangible presence. I contracted myself into one person again and sat down. Please, I said, I have no desire to frighten you. Sit down and let's be reasonable. At the Dulce base. Truth is, Miss Anati, said one of them, the Greys are an immediate threat and are right here and we cannot control them. The Anunnaki are far away, but still we can see what you wish to help. We can see that you wish to help us, and it should be considered. What would you want us to do? I want you to start by going into some of the more important places where humans and Greys interact, I said. I need much data to deliver to the High Council of Nibiru and receive instructions before I meet the President of the United States, among others. I think the best thing to do is to go to Dulce in New Mexico. It is the most important laboratory of the Greys in the United States government, and said one of them. The others nodded in agreement. There are bases in Nevada, Arizona, and Colorado, among others, but Dulce is the most important. Very well. Would you assign one of the members to come with me? Act as my escort, I said. Yes, Colonel X will go with you. The colonel rose. He seemed to be a respectful, middle-aged man. In reality, he was certainly a Grey. As before, I pretended not to notice. Would you like me to materialize you there, I asked. No, I think it would be best if we go in a more traditional way, said the colonel. We don't want to startle the people into Dulce too much. It is best if they don't panic. I agreed. We decided to go the next day in a military plane. On the plane, the colonel, who had become reasonably friendly, gave me some information about Dulce. It's all underground, you know, he said. People know about 7 layers, but in truth there are 9 I am aware of, perhaps more I don't even know about. It's really a very large compound. Where is it exactly, I asked. It lies under the Archuleta Mesa in the Guadalajara Apache Indian Reservation near the town of Dulce. Very easy to keep it a secret, the way it is constructed, he said, and they are very careful about security. You will see. We finally landed at the small airfield. A medium-sized building guarded and surrounded with a high wire fence stood in the desert. We entered a normal room. I noticed the cameras in the entrance, and the woman in the military uniform looked at some papers Colonel Jones presented to her, but the security was not impressive. I realized later that the deeper you went into the compound, the stricter the security was. She pressed a button and a man came to escort us through a door that led to an escalator. From then on, it seemed we were descending into hell. We were joined by a gray. Everything was clean, shiny, and metallic, much like I remembered from my unpleasant day with the hybrids. No matter where you looked, you saw a security camera. There were side doors everywhere. Apparently, many secret exits and entrances existed, and each was loaded with security features, some seen, some invisible. The first level. On the first level, we were joined by a gray. He was polite and distant and showed us into various offices without much comment. The offices were normal, military, and stark. Maps hung on the walls with many push-ups in various colors stuck into them. The individual colors the grays explained showed sites of high activity of different subjects. Green, for example, showed sites of heavy spaceship activities, including those of extraterrestrials that were not grays and were considered enemies by them. Red were for areas of cattle mutilation and collection of animal blood. Blue indicated underground activities in caverns. I do not remember all the colors and sites, but the arrangement was quite elaborate. The offices were monitored constantly by humans who wore military-like jumpsuits. Each carried a gun, quite visible. All the uniforms were decorated with the symbol of the triangle, much like the Phoenician delta symbol. They had various letters and numbers on each triangle, supposedly signifying rank, but I never found out if this was true. When they saw that we were accompanied by the gray, they simply ignored us. The second level. The second level was exactly the same, full of offices, but after the first level we reached the escalator, we used only elevators. I was told that the elevators had no cables in them and were controlled magnetically using alien technology. Magnetism also supplied light, which came from flat, round objects where there were no regular light bulbs in sight. The third level. The third level was devoted to hospital-like environment used for impregnation of female humans. I was not allowed into the surgical ward itself, but the gray explained that the experimenters removed the fetus and placed it for speed up growth in an incubator, creating hybrids. In this facility, more than in one I visited during the previous time with the hybrids, they tended to experiment with genetic manipulation during the very early time in the incubator. The results were quite monstrous sometimes. Through the window in the walls, I saw cribs or really a sort of cages with some of the results. Deformed humans were the norm, extra arms and legs, small or very large heads, and creatures that did not really look like humans. What do you do with these? I asked. We harvest certain tissues and then kill them, said the gray. We learn quite a lot from them about genetics. We apply them to our own research. The fourth level. On the fourth level, there were genetic labs that created half-human, half-animal creatures. Their shapes, as I saw them sitting in their cages, were horrific, that I had to avert my eyes. Some of them had a reptilian look, some had fur, and others looked like gargoyles. Do you harvest tissues here too? I asked. Yes, we combine this research with the materials we get from the cows. The research is extremely interesting and useful, said the gray. The 5th, 6th, and 7th levels. The aliens had their living quarters on the 5th, 6th, and 7th. These looked much like military barracks as we passed the corridors and peeked into the rooms, but I saw no reason to enter. I asked the gray if it was true that there were additional levels. This did not seem to faze him at all, and he said in his perfect English that seemed so unpleasant, coupled with his scratchy alien voice, that yes, Of course there were. The 8th level. Apparently, they took advantage of the huge natural caverns under Dulce and created additional levels. They carried even more security there, and the Greys said that if we wanted to go there, he would have to call 2 more Greys to accompany us, and we would need to use an eye identification system. These details were quickly accomplished, and we used a side elevator to the 8th level. Here they also experimented with manipulation of the nervous system by various means. It allowed them to cause disease and even death from a distance. "I am afraid you cannot enter this place where the subjects are kept," said the Grey. "These subjects are mostly insane, dangerous, and very susceptible to change in the routine. If we enter, we might destroy some of the experiments." The 9th level. Level 9, where we were invited to enter, contained a storage unit full of fully grown creatures and tissues in vats, all of them dead. This included tanks full of embryos in various stages of development waiting for use. This place was kept as clean as the rest of the compound, but the smell of chemicals was overwhelming. I simply could not stay there long, and Colonel Jones, who was at the time showed no emotion, suddenly shapeshifted and appeared in his real gray form. "You knew all along, Miss Anati," he said, his voice turning scratchy. "I never thought we could trick you, and you have preferred to appear you would prefer me to appear in my true form in the first place, but my group insisted." "It doesn't signify," I said. "Of course I knew." The other Grey did not pay much attention to the shape-shifting, being used to such practices. The 10th level. Level 10, the most secret of them all, was devoted to human aura research and their extrasensory abilities, including dreams, hypnosis, etc. The researchers were able to record dreams on specialized machines, and the dreams were studied to show part of the major advanced study of psychic power and phenomena. "We were more advanced in this research," said the Grey. "We will have total power over other races. Of course, we mean no harm to the human or the Anunnaki. We are merely concerned with the reptilian races." I almost laughed. No harm to humans? Was the Grey trying to be a PR person? When we finished our tour, we were escorted out of the complex. The plane was waiting for us outside. I said nothing about my disgust, horror, and disbelief to anyone, but I had seen enough, and I knew that this was just the tip of the iceberg. Such treaties must have been entered into by more than just the United States government. The Greys had reached almost total control over humanity. Greys in shape-shifted form. After materializing myself back to New York, I knew I would always be watched, but I also knew how to handle it and how to avoid my watchers. I needed time. First, I spent a few days digesting what I saw. I made myself invisible and left the hotel for hours of exploration. I walked the streets, took the subway, rode on buses, visited museums, stores, offices, hospitals, senior citizens' homes, schools, and more. Everywhere I went, I saw Greys in shape-shifted form. Obviously, they did not only infiltrate the military, but spread out much more. They flooded the city. Some worked in offices, some in restaurants, obviously doing it as a part of their agenda. They were nurses, teachers, officials, sanitation engineers. They were probably doing the same in other cities, urban areas, towns, and even other countries. The Greys and their slaves, the hybrids, have invaded the world. For me, as I mentioned before, it is easy to recognize a shapeshifter. I was taught how to do it by the very best teachers on Nibiru, but a human cannot do so very easily. Your doctor could be one. The nice lady in the department store could be one. The teacher of your young child could be one. In addition, I saw many hybrids, vicious, unfeeling, and manipulative. They flocked mostly into the entertainment industry, the financial world, and the advertising field. It seemed like they liked glamour. The hybrids, the Greys and their slaves, the hybrids had invaded the world. After a few days, I got to work using the same device that had gotten me to the telephone numbers. After a few days, I got to work using the same device that had gotten me the telephone numbers of the NSA members. I spent my time contacting and negotiating with hundreds of people from a number of governments on Earth. I also visited other laboratories, bases, and Air Force fields. Every time I negotiated with them, I encountered the same roadblocks. Every government on Earth was in terror of the Greys. The Anunnaki were feared too, and the knowledge that they would very likely attempt to clean the Earth terrified the humans, but not enough to get them out of their fearful paralysis regarding the Greys. But that was not the worst of it. Unbelievably, many individuals in power simply did not care. All they wanted was to keep their power and control to wage war. They wanted to make billions and keep it within a tiny group of the financial elite, while the rest of the world was permitted to go to the devil. This was a long mission. For years, I went from country to country, getting in touch with people in power, acquiring knowledge, collecting data, and transferring it every night to Nibiru. The High Council took it all very calmly, and when I despaired, they reminded me that my services were invaluable despite the seemingly unachievable goal of converting humanity. The only bright points of my day were my evening conversations with my daughter and my husband, who were always supportive and loving. I drudged on until I thought that nothing more could be achieved. I stayed until late 2007, and then I made the call and requested permission to go back to Nibiru and made my final report. As always, Marduch, Marduchk, was there for me, and I left Earth. And I left an Earth I no longer loved. I was going home. And that was pages 59 to 72.